To date, we know of only one planet that's alive. A throbbing planet at the heart of a boundless universe. A blue-tinted, misty planet that pulsates to water's changing rhythms. The Earth revolves in space like an enormous drop. 3/4 of the planet's surface is liquid, and the salt water in our seas and oceans covers these areas. Water brings life's music to every corner of the globe. Its waves appear to beat time to our planet's deep rhythm. The drumming rain on these puddles promises to alleviate the Earth's thirst. No matter where it may fall, rain provides vigor and life. Water's voice comes in many tones. The waterfall's awesome roar gives a powerful voice to our mighty rivers. And the soft murmur of windswept clouds and mist travels across skies and lands in a never-ending journey. Every being on our planet is to a greater or lesser degree made of water. Water always accompanies life. And life, with its several million distinct faces, composes a universe whose variety is hard to imagine. Earth is a wet planet, and that's possibly the best way to say, to understand, that the Earth is alive. Man looks for signs to determine whether he's alone in the universe. Space missions bound for Mars and research on planets and galaxies even farther away attempt to find out whether there is life out in the distance. Water is the trail they're after. Wherever it appears, we are certain that life is possible. We search the stars for different forms of life, while back down here we let life slip away. On the Earth, on our planet's moist skin, life seems to have entered a state of crisis, and water is beginning to show strange and alarming symptoms. Many species whose lives revolve around water, beings that depend on our tropical rainforests, on our seas, on our rivers, or on our wetlands for their survival, are decreasing in numbers, slowly becoming extinct, along with the landscapes they inhabit. Every day, scientists attest to the precariousness of many species' existence. We just need to look around in order to discover some of the symptoms of the serious illness that water and its landscapes are suffering. Europe's rivers, perhaps the best known and most studied rivers on the planet, maintain a diversity that surprises even the experts. The old continent of Europe hosts 522 species of freshwater fish, a figure that's nothing to be scoffed at. However, no fewer than 200 of these are threatened with extinction, and a dozen have already disappeared forever. Freshwater ecosystems are amazingly sensitive to human activity, and their entire ecological framework suffers when the quality of the water or its surroundings is degraded. Fish, that is to say those vertebrates most dependent on water, are under a much graver environmental threat than birds or mammals, simply because the aquatic environment is especially vulnerable. The sturgeon story is perhaps the most compelling proof of the river's decline. More than 20 very primitive species are classified under the name of sturgeon. The best known is the Caspian Sea's beluga, which can live over 100 years and produce nearly 90% of all the caviar consumed in the world. Up until the middle of the last century, sturgeon could be found in almost every river in Europe. But in just a few years, pollution, dams, and uncontrolled fishing have done away with them all. The only healthy sturgeon populations left are found in faraway places with little human intervention. The Caspian Sea was one such place. Despite their economic and social value, sturgeon may soon disappear from Russia due to illegal overexploitation by the mafias that sprang up following the Soviet Union's demise. Sturgeon capture has plummeted from 22,000 tons to less than 1,000 in just the last decades, an alarming sign of decline. Their future is very uncertain. Aside from the mafias, society's unsustainable development is behind this drama. In addition to overexploitation and pollution of the riverbeds, the construction of large dams without taking any measures at all to allow sturgeon to reach their spawning grounds prevents them and many other migratory species from reproducing. The case of the midwife toad is very different. The Mallorcan midwife toad is one example of an amphibian on the brink of extinction. Their decline began at the time of the Roman Empire, when water snakes were introduced that soon decimated their population. The introduction of predators has been followed in the past few centuries by hydraulic works that have devastated part of their habitat. For years, they seemed destined to disappear, but efforts to breed them in captivity and reintroduce them in their natural habitat have been successful. Experts and authorities have banded together to study the midwife toad and breed it in captivity, helping reintroduce this species in its natural habitat and keeping a close watch on the places where it lives in the wild. The result is an almost miraculous resurrection. Freshwater wetlands, also known as inland lagoons, are home to a little fish with a similar story. The Iberian tooth carp is facing circumstances that are very similar to those of the midwife toad. Wetlands in many parts of the planet are drying out, and with their disappearance, many beings have become extinct. This little fish, that lives only on Spain's Mediterranean coast and in northern Africa, was also headed that way. Desiccation of wetlands to use as farmland, along with extreme pollution, nearly wiped out their population, putting them in grave danger of extinction. Today, the Iberian tooth carp, as well as many other fish on the continent, survive only because small reserves were created, laws were passed, and the fish were bred in captivity. However, problems still persist. One very important problem is the introduction of very competitive invasive species, or species such as the black bass that prey on the native fish until they become extinct. Freshwater species have many problems when it comes to survival, but marine species are not too far behind. In the Caribbean alone, 40% of the mangrove swampland has been destroyed in the past 25 years. Mangrove swamps protect the coastline, filter out pollution, and are host to a rich community of beings. But we destroy them in order to raise apartment buildings and tourist resorts, or to build large intensive aquaculture facilities. The extent of this deterioration is so great that mangroves on many coasts have disappeared. And with them, animals as special as the manatee. In years past, manatees were hunted for their tasty meat. But in some territories, such as the United States, they have been protected by law since 1893. However, this protection wasn't very useful. The main enemy this animal faces is the coastline's ongoing transformation. When their habitat is disturbed, manatees are faced with many factors that work against them. Thanks to their peaceful nature and friendly appearance, manatees are very popular. But this is an inconvenience rather than an advantage, since tourists have become a disturbing nuisance. Aside from destroying the original ecosystem, nearby apartment complexes also pollute the water manatees live in and play an indirect role in the increased number of accidents involving recreational watercraft. Many individual manatees suffer serious injuries that can often end up being fatal or leave them crippled for life. To prevent these problems, sanctuaries and reserves were created that have served to protect some populations whose survival appears to be assured. Fur seals or sea lions half the world over have suffered a similar fate to the manatees. Not too long ago, from the coasts of the United States and Mexico to Uruguay, it was possible to find colonies that included millions of sea lions. Many of these populations no longer exist, and those that have survived find shelter in protected spaces. Brutal hunting in search of their pelts and blubber was the cause of their decline. Until the middle of the last century, almost 90% of seals were hunted down in Argentina alone. Following the massacre, the scarce few seals left on some of the more remote islands have begun to recover their herds. Even now that they are protected almost everywhere, illegal hunting continues with captures destined for Asian countries. Every year, hundreds of male adults are killed, their testicles hacked off, and distributed in an absurd black market for aphrodisiacs. But the seals' problems do not end here. Fishing fleets trap and kill a significant percentage of animals in their nests. In addition, these fishing fleets are so efficient, and the volume of their catch is so large, that they're doing away with the schools of fish the pinnipeds feed on. As a matter of fact, fishing grounds, which are an invaluable source of food, are disappearing at an alarming rate. This is one of the gravest dangers oceans are currently faced with. A look at the figures will help us understand the degree of this destruction. The fish demand doubled at the end of the last century, and in the past 30 years, at least 20 of the world's most important fishing grounds have disappeared. A classic example: the large banks of fish in the northeastern Atlantic region, where enormous volumes of codfish were caught, disappeared in the 1990s. 20 years later, these schools show no sign of recovery. The fishing methods used are so efficient that they don't allow the fish population time to recover. Overexploitation is just as easy to measure. Those species most in demand on the market that is, those we citizens buy, have dwindled by almost 70% in the past 40 years. As codfish, sardines, and tuna fish become extinct, we look for new species to replace them. In the last few decades, sharks have been chosen, and the result, as always, has been devastating. Sharks, which have played the leading role in so many legends, tales, and films, are now in the crosshairs. After millions of years of evolution, human beings are massacring them and making them disappear. They're destined to be turned into steak, animal feed, or shark's fin soup. However, if sharks were to become extinct, marine ecosystems would be profoundly disrupted. The shark's disappearance across large expanses of ocean has been linked to a decrease in the number of oysters, clams, and other mollusks that man exploits commercially. These images of hammerhead sharks may be the last to reflect a certain abundance. Hammerhead sharks are caught for sport, and their meat is also sold. This new fad makes no distinction between young and adult, and the absence of laws to adequately regulate their capture is inevitably leading to their disappearance. Along the coasts of the United States, their situation is critical. Their population has dwindled by 98% since the 1980s. However, every other species of shark in the world is faced with a similar fate, and it's now estimated that the total number of sharks has fallen by 70%. Each year, new species such as the thresher shark, the mackerel shark, the blue shark, or the oceanic white-tip shark join the ranks of endangered species. It seems that no one at sea is safe from human greed. This simple survey is alarming, but obviously there is something we can do to preserve nature. Sea lions, manatees, and the midwife toad are proof of our power to fix things. But are these real solutions, or are they just pushing back a death sentence that's already been foretold? Everything now depends on us. We have the information and knowledge necessary to manage our water resources. It's no longer the sole responsibility of the government or international and non-governmental organizations. Preserving our planet depends upon the day-to-day decisions made by millions of citizens like us, who must commit to creating a better world.